All right. Hey, I just looked at my watch and it's 2 o'clock Eastern time, which means we're ready to get this thing rolling. Everybody, I wanted to say thank you so much for joining us. I'm glad that you're here today. We've got a good hour to spend. And oh, here comes my video. That's me, Gene Marks. I'm glad that you guys are with us today. We are planning on a great hour of conversation between myself and two people who know a lot more about security than I will ever know. While we talk about really some of the biggest security issues and threats and issues, your risks that are facing your business, not only this year, but probably through the next couple of years. And we'd like to leave you with some thoughts, give you some updates, and some actions that you can take. So before I introduce my panel, just a quick introduction of myself. My name is Gene Marks. Very nice to meet you. I run a technology management firm outside of Philadelphia, but I also do a lot of writing. I write for The Guardian, I write for The Hill, I write for the Washington Times, Philadelphia Inquirer, Entrepreneur, and I write for Forbes. I do all that every week. Forbes, though, is where I really focus on technology. So I do a weekly roundup of technology news that affects small businesses. That comes out on Sunday morning. So if you want to stay current on what's going on in the world of small business, by all means, join me on that weekly roundup. And in addition to that, I also do a twice monthly column on customer relationship management software and issues, again, for Forbes. So that's me. I'm also a CPA. I know a little bit about the technology to be dangerous, but not as much as I would like to know. So let me bring on our panel if I can. So Roman, I'm going to ask you to turn on your webcam. There you go. Unmute yourself. And Eric, folks, his webcam is not working, most likely because Eric's having a security issue. So that means we've just banished Eric from the panel. I mean, come on, the guy's talking about security. But no, I'm just kidding. So, but Eric is here. So first of all, Eric, say hello so everybody knows that you're out there.
Hello. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon.
There you go. You're there. So Eric, first of all, I'm going to start with you, and then Roman, I'll head on over to you. So you are the Chief Security Architect and Principal Consultant at the Macmillan Group. What does that mean, and what does your company do?
Okay. We do soup to nuts from security consulting. So everything from doing risk assessments, vulnerability assessments, all the way to providing incident response services for our clients. The vast majority of our clients are professional service or community-sized financial institutions.
Very cool. How long have you been doing this?
About 28 years now.
I didn't even know you're that old. We've never met face to face. I thought you were like a young guy, fresh out of college, still playing softball.
Nope. Limping around more than anything nowadays. So
yeah. And I have to ask you, if you've been doing this for 28 years, you're in the security business. Are you more frightened or less frightened than you were 28 years ago?
More so, because when I first started, it was fairly easy. The bad guys knew what they were doing. They were generally on college campuses, someplace that had high access of bandwidth, and there just weren't near as many. Nowadays, it's a criminal enterprise. Anybody that has Google and a cable modem can attack you from any place in the world, and it's become democratized, I guess would be the appropriate term.
Yeah, it's crazy, and it's created a multi-billion-dollar industry of software makers, consultants, experts like yourself, trying to fend it off to help our clients.
We're even running into ransomware groups now that are not even sending out the ransomware themselves. They're reselling the software and support services to other cyber criminals.
Awesome. That's great. That's so nice of them too. They're just sharing it all with others and, earning a little money. And that's great. It does my heart good. Roman, how about you? Roman Kepsic is the Director of Firm Technology at Right Networks. Tell us about your job, Roman, and also tell us a little bit about Right Networks.
Well, my role at Right Networks is pretty much being an outsourced IT partner to accounting firms. Pretty much I am a CPA. My background was actually doing taxes in the largest regional firm in here in Arizona. And by virtue of us rolling out networks, became Novell certified. When Eric and I started our careers, actually Novell was the network that was secure, and you can make it secure.
Well, thanks for alienating everybody that's under the age of 35 by bringing up Novell.
But what happens is I was actually, like I said, as a partner in a large firm, I rolled out the networks there, and then started centralizing and consulting in our offices on applications. And before you know it, I got tagged as being a independent outsourced IT consultant to firms. And so that's what I've done for the last 20 years is I work exclusively within CPA firms, helping them first analyzing the way they process their tax returns, their audits. I do a high-level security review, but nothing close to what Eric does at all. But we help them with their policies and all that. And my practice was acquired by Right Networks through their eccentric affiliate about 8 years ago. And so my role is helping firms identify, implement best practices, as well as being aware of all of the things such as security, IT governance. And I help develop a lot of the policies within Right Networks. For instance, we just rolled out a remote work policy. We developed the AI CPA security policy. And so pretty much as the clients of Right Networks have questions, they get channeled to me, and we provide resources, solutions, and recommendations.
That's great. That's great. All right, so guys, let's get into this. I got to start off with a story. Eric, I didn't even know if you had joined us the conversation yet. Roman and I were talking. So, when my roundup column comes out in Forbes on Sunday, I'm writing about a little group called Dark Side, Eric. And this group called Dark Side, I just want to read this out to you guys because this is what's going to come out on Sunday. Just to start off this conversation. Dark Side, which is a ransomware group, has been donating portions of its ransom received from companies they've hacked to various charities. The group, which has been operating since August of this year, typically attacks big corporations, encrypts and steals their data, then demands a large ransom costing companies millions of dollars. The group released a statement that they only focus on big for-profit organizations and have taken pride in giving a portion of the paid ransom to charities such as Children International to help children in poverty, among several other nonprofits. Isn't that wonderful of them? They're extorting money from companies and giving it to charities. Eric, tell us about your thoughts about ransomware today, when you've got organizations like this that are literally giving away money to charities after stealing it from companies?
Well, ransomware today is probably the #1 issue that we're dealing with. From 2019 to the end of last month in 2020, number of ransomware attacks are up over 100% year over year. And it is, I have a brother who's a retired DEA agent, and he told me that they were briefed before he retired that cybercrime was now generating as much money as the global drug trade. And I don't know what the total amount is, but I know I've seen pictures where they just had pallets of cash that they had to weigh. They couldn't count it, they weighed it. So this problem is not going to go away anytime soon. And ransomware is also taking advantage of the biggest weakness we have in any organization, and that's our end users. Because it's always one of them that either clicks on a link or downloads a file that they're not supposed to.
It's a big issue. And Roman, Eric really, he's very shy about admitting it, but his brother that works for the DEA is named Hank and appeared on Breaking Bad for a number of years. And very sorry to see, Eric, how that all ended up. But what about you, Roman? What are your thoughts on ransomware in general? I mean, doesn't this story blow your mind, or is it not surprising?
Well, they're probably trying to counter some of the bad press they've received and to pretend they're altruistic in a way. The reality is the FBI has found out that so many, I'll say, amateur criminal organizations have gotten into it and used the software that, you guys pointed out, the ransomware as a service, that the percentage of firms that actually get the encryption key to unlock their data is being reduced. So it used to be there was a little bit of honor among thieves, probably 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, and the percentage of ransomwares that once you paid it, they unlocked your data and you got it, and life was good. But what they realized is, you pointed out the amount of money that is making is so lucrative and it's so much safer than drugs that all organized crime is getting into it. And so the downside on ransomware, the dark side that isn't really discussed as much is if you're a victim of ransomware, first of all, your odds of getting your data back are below 80% now, which it used to be over 90%. Second of all, what they're finding is because these people the new groups are so unethical according to hacking standards, that they're going in there and they're in your network for weeks, if not months beforehand, stealing and trying to capture all the data they can to monetize it. So even if you pay the ransom, what they're going to do is actually use that against you. That's actually happened to a couple medical, legal, and CPA firms. What they mean is they got in there, got the data, and then even though they've got the ransom and didn't close it down, they started blackmailing. And one of the classic stories was actually a plastic surgery center in California, where they took all the patient's files, got the before and after pics, their name, address, social security number, everything. And so after they got their money from the plastic surgery center, they started individually blackmailing people to say, hey, we're going to put this out in public. And we saw the same thing with Trump's information, say from the law firm, Lady Gaga, they're auctioning off data because it's just, they can monetize that well beyond the stacks of money that Eric was talking about.
It's terrible. So these firms they're not only taking advantage of innocent people, they're violating the international standards of the Federal Hacking Association.
Absolutely.
Set up in good faith by hackers all around the world.
They're going to get their certification revoked.
It's terrible. It is just really, are there no ethics anymore? It's just absolutely what the world has come to. So guys, okay, so we all get it. I mean, we've been around, there's no need to explain what ransomware is. Everybody knows at this point. We know that it's a big issue. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. These people are giving away money to charities at this point. It's out of control. So really it is up to ourselves, not only to our firms as CPAs to protect our data and our client data, but also to help our clients do the same thing. So, okay, it's the end of 2020. Hopefully some of the defenses have gotten a little bit better. So I'm going to come to each of you guys and ask for you to throw out a couple of ways and suggestions. I've got a couple myself. What can we do to protect ourselves? So Roman, I'll throw it back to you. Give me like 2 things, just 2. That leaves it open for me and Eric to contribute a couple as well. Go ahead.
Well, I think Eric hit the nail on the head that basically our end users are our biggest risk. When I go in and I do reviews of CPA firms, we find that the stuff that your IT person is responsible for, whether it's the server updates, the antivirus malware that they're running, the Windows standards, locking out USB drives, those kind of things, they're doing a really good job of those. What happens though is as we pushed people home because of COVID, we also included people such as administrators or tax people who may not have been previously remote and who may not have been in that mindset to think of security when they're at home. And so when they got home, they just turned on their computer, they logged in the firm's network. And so they may not have known, for instance, how to use multi-factor authentication, how the firm had it, or not using, for instance, a VPN, virtual private network. So probably the first thing is a secure connection on my list. And I think the 2 things that help firms the most from a secure connection perspective is doing real-time training right now with all of our remote workers on how to effectively use the VPN. And if you don't have that structure set up or a remote access tool, making sure you mandate the use of multi-factor authentication. A lot of the tax software has that MFA built into it, as well as there's firm solutions such as Duo and Okta that we've seen implemented successfully in the firms. And then there's training. The second thing is ongoing training. And I don't know if that was a question you want to discuss now or a little bit later, but
we'll jump into the training in a minute, and I would like to bring that back up. But let me, I'm going to play it dumb for just a little bit, Roman. First of all, VPN, okay? So I'm working from home. I need to connect into files or applications that are on my company's server or network. So the most secure way is to do a VPN connection. So
Yep.
does that mean that I need to have my employees running separate software on their local devices that establishes that connection? So it's not just done through just a browser, it is actual software that needs to be run. Is that right? How does that
Yeah.
work?
And I'll let Eric get into more technical aspects of this, but pretty much we run, like a Cisco VPN client, a remote connect that's secure. There's a whole series of secure tools, but what happens is once you log in the internet, you log into the VPN, and then it encrypts all your traffic as you go back and forth. And so that means when you log into your firm's network, both your login name and all of your passwords and all that are encrypted all the way through. So if, for instance, someone has compromised your home computer internet router, for instance, what happens is if you're just logging in straight into the firm network, if they have a keyboard logger somehow attached to your network, they're capturing your login and password. And so we think the VPN is one secure way of doing that. It's also important to make sure, we can get into the rules of home security as part of this discussion.
Yeah.
But
I'm gonna get back to the home security
Okay.
too, but even while I'm on the VPN, and I won't belabor the case, but Eric, Roman is mentioning VPNs. Obviously, they encrypt the data going back and forth, and I just want to be clear because we're at this stage right now where nobody believes that all security is fallible and guaranteed. So when you hear like, oh well, if you have a VPN, it encrypts your data back and forth. So is that it? Is that all we need to do is make sure that the data is encrypted? Are there holes in encryption? Can hackers get around that?
Yes, depending upon how your VPN is set up, the encryption itself is great, but a lot of times that encryption is based on a password or a passphrase to establish that as the key. And if you choose a bad password, such as password 1234, it doesn't do you any good because they're still going to be able to break in. So again, having that strong passphrase and two-factor authentication is a must for remote workers nowadays.
Does encryption we're talking about our own files in our places, but a lot of people use web-based applications as well. There might be cloud-based accounting or CRM or even social media. Does encryption? Give you an example. Today's big news. Did you guys see the news that the president's password was hacked to Twitter? Did you read that? Somebody literally hacked his password, and his password was MAGA 2020 and like a couple other symbols. It was something really obvious. And I don't know. I would have thought that should the White House have like some kind of better encryption there, for the president? And I realized that putting aside the hilarity of that, because it's just his Twitter account, but it's serious stuff if you've got people working from home and they're going into cloud-based applications. Maybe it's your e-commerce application, or maybe it's maybe it is your Facebook page for your company or your firm. Does encryption get in the middle of that as well?
Yes, through TLS or SSL. So the traffic between your browser and that website would be encrypted. We do have an attack for that as well, though. We use a man-in-the-middle attack because, most end users, again, due to lack of training, lack of awareness, are not looking to see, okay, do I have that little lock up in the bar? Or they'll get a pop-up on their screen that says, the security certificate does not match the website. Well, anybody that sees that should stop, do a little more investigating before just clicking on it. However, end users have what we call clickitis, and so they just hit clear, and so they may still have a secure encryption, but it's a secure encryption from them to a machine controlled by a hacker who then just reroutes them. So they're reading everything within that encrypted tunnel as it goes through. And going back to the president's password, the other problem with web applications is I can almost guarantee that MAGA 2020 password is being used elsewhere as well. So
Right.
all that password reuse.
So my issue with the president's password is it was MAGA 2020. I mean, what about 2021, guys, right? Or 2022? Should we be great for all these years? Does it have to be just 2020? Roman, we're talking about passwords. You mentioned and this is all with the ransomware. It's all about security. So, okay, we talked about VPN, getting that set up. Passwords. So first of all, what is your advice on passwords and like should every one of my employees, should I be making sure that they all use a password manager? Is
Yeah.
that okay? Tell me about, what does a password manager do? Is it a pain in the neck to use? Do you have any recommendations for a password manager? What are your thoughts?
Well, for the first level here is like passwords that are under 12 characters can be figured out by the software hackers very quickly and all that. And so as a starting point, at a minimum, even if you have a VPN and multi-factor authentication, if you're going to use a password still, we recommend you use passphrases, which could be 4 random words. So that helps you type very quickly 12, 16, 18 characters into the system. The second thing is you should never reuse a derivative of a password. So you pointed out MAGA 2021, 22, 23. You can set the system so that's not allowed. Third of all, you can't reuse those on any other application. And that's where we get in trouble, because a lot of the accounting applications have different renewal cycles. And so some might be at 90 days, some might be at 60 days. And so when you're trying to remember these names, it becomes virtually impossible. And so putting those passwords inside of a password wallet, and there's tools like LastPass, RoboForm, Keeper, Zoho has one too, these wallets, makes it easy for you to have big ugly passwords in each location. And if they do get one of your passwords, they can't reuse it in all those, because the hackers know they actually have artificial intelligence tools that they go in and they learn your profile of who you are. If you're an accountant, they learn all the different accounting applications, and they'll try to use your login, which is very often your own email address.
Yeah.
And then they'll try to use derivatives of that password to get into the system. And so I'm a proponent of password vaults, and we support LastPass within our organization.
Can you give me an example of a password that you've recently used that not using anymore? Like, I mean, like, is it like a phrase that you normally use with letters and numbers and stuff?
No, it was 3 random words. It happened to
right?
be like Pacific. It was a university, and then a number with a special character.
Got it. Mine was Emily in Paris 2020 with 2 exclamations.
Oh, that's
Because
actually
nobody
good.
would expect a 55-year-old guy to even have that kind of a password, right? So, because I'm just kidding. Eric, what are your thoughts on passwords as well? Do you use a password manager, and do you agree with what Roman said?
Yes, I agree with Roman, and I use a 1Password password manager because it goes across my phone, my laptop, my tablet, and everything. And a trick that I use for my passphrase to secure that password database is I use lyrics from the Beatles song catalog. And
Wow, that's like unlimited.
Everybody goes, wow, we can figure out your passphrase now. Have you ever seen how big that catalog is?
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, 64,000 holes that fill the Albert Hall. So right there and then. I mean, right. Eric, multi-factor authentication is the next part of having passwords, right? So it's not just having a password to get in, but it's then having it authenticated from another source. So tell us, again, I'm getting back. Roman explained, like, okay, you have a VPN software, it's separate software, your employee runs it, they go through the software to establish that connection, all that's great. Now we want multi-factor authentication. So, it's not just logging in, but it's then getting like a text message saying, with a code or something like that, right? So tell us your thoughts on multi-factor authentication, and is that another piece of software that all of our employees also have to be running on their devices?
Not necessarily a piece of software that they have to be running. Again, we have the ones where it can be a text-based message or even a callback. But two-factor or multi-factor authentication is a must today, because even if we use a very strong passphrase, someplace, well, a lot of these attacks that we're seeing against large organizations are going after the password databases so they can reverse engineer them. So even if you did everything right and you have a 37 character passphrase, if the bad guys pick that up from someplace else, well, it would be game over. With multi-factor, well, yeah, it's great that they have your passphrase, but unless they also have your phone with your Duo app or your fob, it's not going to do them any good. So like I tell my clients going forward, any type of access that you're doing from out of the office or any type of administrative access should definitely have a multi-factor method attached to it.
So Eric, one of my favorite podcasts is I don't know if you guys have ever heard of a podcast called Reply All, which is it is a super popular podcast, and maybe we're all just you guys just too old to listen to it because it's a bunch of millennials talking about tech, and it is they investigate weird things that go on the internet, and they did a whole thing about this woman's Snapchat account that was stolen, and somebody else hacked it and took it over, and they went and they found the hacker who did it, which is fascinating. And one of the things they talked about is about multi-factor authentication, how hackers can get around it because they can spoof your phone, right? And in some cases they can buy a phone and call up, because they can hack and get so much of your data. You can call up Verizon, and Verizon asks for your social security number, which a lot of hackers can find. And then you say, yeah, I got a new phone. Can you please switch it to this phone, my phone number? And then it switches to the phone they have. And then when you have multi-factor authentication, the text message comes to now the phone that the hacker has. And then they can still log into the account. In other words, it's not all these things we're talking about, VPN and even multi-factor authentication, smart hackers can still get around multi-factor authentication, correct?
Correct. And sometimes they'll just, and again, it's going to depend on the value of the target. Exactly. For something low hanging, they're not going to go to all that trouble. If we're talking nation states going for industrial espionage or military intelligence, then that's a very small hurdle for them to clear. But we've seen cases where they've actually just cloned somebody's phone, so when the code arrives, it arrives at two phones at the same time.
Right.
But unfortunately, in our current circumstances, we just have to raise the bar just a little bit, and because there's enough easy targets out there, the bad guys like return on investment as much as we do, so they're going to move right on and go after those easier targets as long as we've put in those simple steps.
Yeah, that makes sense, Roman, doesn't it? I mean, if you're a hacker and you do run into a company with a VPN or a company that has multi-factor authentication, yeah, you can get around it, but why waste your time when there's so many people that don't have that stuff? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and part of the training of multi-factor authentication is also informing your users that if they wake up one morning and then they see someone tried to log in at 10 o'clock, and it wasn't them, it's a sheer sign that someone has got their password and login. And that was actually the scenario of how the IRS, working with one of the major tax software providers, they noticed that at night, like at 2 o'clock, there was people logging into the tax program of a whole series of accounting firms, stripping off all the state returns. And when they would send them the multi-factor authentication note, they would say, like, did I log in last night? And it was no. Well, at that point, you need to train your users that they have been compromised and immediately change the password, or have procedures in place so that account can be shut down by the IT team.
we keep dancing around the whole topic of training. So, let's jump into that as well. It just seems, particularly now because of COVID, we got so many people working from home. It almost seems like yet another cost that we as firm managers have to bear is probably to hire somebody to not only inspect our home workers, what they're doing, but also to provide training. Does that, are you recommending that to your clients?
Yeah, we actually recommend it be outsourced to someone who does it full time.
Yeah.
What we found within most of accounting firms, their internal IT people are so busy handling the fires day to day that very seldom do they keep up to speed with security and the current threats that are out there. And so within Right Networks, for instance, we use a company called Know Before. And what Know Before does, and it's one of, 20 different companies out there. Matter of fact, in the CPA FMA survey of medium and larger size firms, we see Know Before, FishMe, Wombat Security, all these providers who help businesses by doing phishing training, threat awareness training, like when the Zoom thing started happening where people were Zoom bombing and all that. But they constantly update the training, and they do it with a LMS, a learning management system, to verify that every single employee is up to date on their training. And so the nice thing about these training programs is they work really well in this COVID environment where all our training is virtual. And so what I mean by that is that, I get a notice that there's a Know Before update that's 15 minutes. And then if I don't do it within 2 days, I get a reminder that says you need to complete this. And then the third time, the supervisor gets a notice that Roman has not completed his training. So that's one way to kind of enforce the training happening in the remote environment. These companies also send out actual threats to see, are you susceptible to a phishing email? So I just got one from our CEO, Joel Hughes, that said, hey, Roman, I need to talk to you about something. Can you log on, take a look at the spreadsheet? And I'm like, he would never ask me to look at a spreadsheet without touching with Teams first. And so, but those are the kind of phishing messages that you constantly have to send out to your firms. And I know Eric knows so much more. He's more current on these things.
I mean, that's helpful. And by the way, that email I got from Joel Hughes invited me to his house for dinner on Friday. I should ignore that, right?
No, you should basically just report it as a phishing attempt. That's one of the nice features inside of.
I thought that guy was inviting me for dinner on Friday. It's really interesting to stay home. So yeah, Eric, what do you think? I mean, is that tell us a little bit more about training and involving your IT firm. I mean, this has got to be a huge issue with work from home. I mean, every study I read is that the ransomware makers are loving what's going on. And by the way, Eric, before you respond to that, I do want to say for all of you guys tuning in right now, we have a bunch. Already people are posting questions. Please post more questions. We'll stop about 10, 15 minutes before, and I'm going to go through each one of these questions, and we're going to try and make one of our experts look really foolish right on live video for everybody to see. So bring them on. Keep ask if there's anything that I did not address or we covered. We'll go back, but post your questions in the question page. So Eric, back to you. So tell us about your thoughts on training your people and what tools, and should we be springing for an outside company to come in and do this work for us in this work from home era?
Well, one, I agree with Roman. I tell all my clients, if you can invest in the security awareness education for your people, everything else is a waste of money. But so many firms and organizations will outsource to somebody like Know Before, but the only thing they'll take advantage of is just the phishing test, and they use it more as a penalty or a gotcha game as opposed to an education opportunity, which is where it needs to be. Because like the old cliche on terrorism, we have to be correct 100% of the time. They only have to be correct once.
Right.
And so and again, I agree with Roman that yes, you probably want to outsource that, just because either that, unless you have a training coordinator, somebody that can develop all that content. And again, that content probably needs to be developed by somebody with an education background, not necessarily an IT background. But even with outsourcing, we need to have somebody within the firm, whether it's a firm manager, a trainer, but somebody that's responsible for ensuring that it is being used properly. And the training needs to be continuous, not just a one time a year thing. We got to keep it to the front of their mind that, hey, does this email or this text or this phone call, does it pass the smell test? If not, stop and, ask questions. I always told people when I was on the operations side, I'd rather receive 1,000 false positives than have one piece of ransomware get in the network.
Fair enough. Eric, let's also talk about operating systems. I mean, you had trouble actually accessing this with your video because you're using this crappy operating system. What is it, iOS 10? Is that what it
He's
is?
the most secure person we know.
Yeah.
OS 10.
Yeah, iOS 10, which nobody uses that operating system, right? But besides that, is there, tell us your thoughts on keeping, I mean, this seems like the most basic thing, and yet people fail to do it all the time, about making sure that your operating systems are up to date.
Yes. Again, there's all sorts of hardware and software in the security realm nowadays, and everybody seems to think, hey, we need to go out and buy this. If you do 3 simple things, train your people, patch your systems on a regular basis. I'm not saying you have to do it the Wednesday after patches come out, but probably within a week to 10 days at the latest. Because right now, even though the bad guys may not have a 0 day, they're downloading those patches too and reverse engineering them. So generally within 72 hours of a patch coming out, we'll have proof of concept exploit code available for download across the internet. They're going that fast. This one with the 0 login from earlier this month, they've already got it wormable. So it's spreading like wildfire across the internet right now. And it's all because people don't want to patch. Now, being the one non-CPA on this call, I'm gonna take a swing at some of my accounting firms.
Uh-oh.
Just because it's busy season doesn't mean we stop patching our software. I have a lot of clients that say, oh, nope, we've been told we can't patch from 1 January till the end of April. You're leaving yourself wide open. If you have a planned maintenance window, once a week or something like that on a Sunday, tell everybody, log off, chill out, go meditate or something, get your patching done. You're going to lose a lot less time than if a piece of ransomware or any other type of malware gets into your network.
That is such an accounting thing to do, isn't it? It's like all these CPA firm partners, I'm like the guiltiest of them all. When you're in busy season, you're just like, we're going to push it off till after busy season, right? Vacations after busy season, that big internal project after busy, the new baby after busy season. Everything has got to be after, and yet this is one thing you just can't do. Roman, backups. Now, people tell me that we should be doing, you need to be doing backups. Does backups protect us? Does that protect us against a malware attack? What could they do?
In theory, if you have a proper backup schema, you should be able to restore in the event you're a victim of ransomware. Now that assumes that the ransomware has happened after your backups were made. Yeah. And as I pointed out earlier, what we're seeing is the hackers are getting in earlier and earlier, planting those bombs in there. Then they spend weeks, if not months, stealing data, trying to set it up so that they can actually use, for instance, your Exchange to send email blasts out to other people to send out more antivirus and all that. And so my concern with backups, honestly, is that if you get hit with ransomware, most of the firms that do their own IT and backups are not adequately protected. That's one of the benefits of the cloud providers out there. And so if you have an application in the cloud, they have much higher level enterprise security, backup schemas and all that. And I think today you have a higher probability of getting your data back if you're a victim of ransomware. If you are in one of these enterprise class cloud providers, whether it's tax software, whether it's QuickBooks Desktop, whatever, then on your own system. What I've seen constantly in firms is that the internal IT departments got set with a budget, and once they go out there and they spend a fortune on a SAN or something like that, to do proper security, they just don't have the budget for it. So they might be doing like 1 week of backups and a monthly archive and annual archive. But more likely than not, the last good backup is 6 months or a year older. And so if you're a victim of ransomware, that's not going to do you any good. We actually had a firm recently, we had a call last week that literally they were using Amazon Web Services for their backup and all that. They had a malware event and basically lost 6 months of data. And the reality is they were not doing proper backups because they were managing them themselves.
Got it. Got it. All right. So guys, so listen, I've got about 10 minutes before I'm going to call a hard stop so we can leave, we can respond to some of these questions that are coming in. So again, everybody watching, feel free to post questions in the pane. I am going to go through them, but Roman, I have some questions that I had written down. Random, but Roman, what is social engineering as it pertains to IT security? What does that mean?
It's the ultimate con. I will call you and try to get on your good side. So I can pretend to be an IT person in your company. I can be a person, for instance, and Eric, you can tell your donut story next, but what happens is I find my way to get into your building and either plug a USB drive, say, hey, I'm just doing maintenance on this, or I'm doing building maintenance. But it's basically me using a professional con man's tricks to get you to trust me, whether to let me into your system. That's the classic Microsoft, hey, I'm from Microsoft here to help you. And basically I noticed if you go into this drive, you have problems. So here, download this piece of software. At that point, it's over. And so it's just different ways that they trick you. So Eric, you got to share your donut story, because that's one of my favorites.
We were doing a physical penetration test against a bank, and the banning of smoking inside has just been fantastic for social engineers, because where does everybody go to smoke? Out the back door.
Right.
So if there's somebody standing out there dressed in a suit or, dressed appropriate for the location, just go with 2 boxes of donuts, because everybody holds the door open for somebody that's bringing in donuts. And if you're really nice, you just open it up and offer one to them while they're standing out there holding the door for you. And they let you ride in, and we go plug something into their network.
Oh my God. Believe me, considering some of the news stories I read, that's kind of like the least of the problems that could occur, right?
Well, and Eric just pointed out a very important point today when he said plug something in your network. Today, there are USB flash drives that are smaller than my pinky nail that have malware on it and everything. And literally all they got to do is plug it in. And, that's Eric, one of his big tricks with the banks. After that, he owns you. It's that simple. So we actually recommend you disallow any storage devices to be connected to that by policy. And so within our cloud, like on my laptop at Right Networks, I cannot plug in, I can plug in a headset and that, but if I try to plug in any flash drive, it will not allow it to upload or connect, even read anything on that drive.
Roman, what are the USB keys that a lot of people are getting now to that give you encryption and stop from people getting in? Google requires it, I think, of their employees. What does that mean?
There's 2 kinds. One is the RSA chip that generates a unique number, something that you can that changes. It's kind of like multi-factor authentication. Another one is a security device like a YubiKey, for instance, that has an encryption protocol. So it's out there. And Eric, I'm hoping you explain the differences between those 2, but what it comes down to is you have a device that plugs in that verifies, it's another piece of multi-factor authentication. But we saw last summer, I did a presentation on security. That day of my presentation, YubiKey had got hacked, and there's one of their models basically was totally invalidated because the hackers had figured out the threat.
Of course. Eric, is that an accurate description?
Yes. YubiKey is the most popular, but there are other USB keys that basically to log into your computer, you have to have them plugged in. But, Roman brought up a good point there with the YubiKey. One of the attacks and stuff that we're seeing more and more common now are against the manufacturers. We had a credit card breach about a year and a half ago, but it was a bunch of chain of Subway sandwich shops, and that was the only thing that they could find in common. Well, what had happened is that franchisee bought all his payment terminals at the same time. Before the payment terminals were even delivered, the hackers had infected them with malware in the factory.
Wow.
So,
Not good.
Again, just because we're buying a name brand product, we still want to do our testing, our monitoring, and things like that to the best of our ability.
Okay. All right, so guys, so let's break and let's look at some of these questions here. And we'll bring these to the end. I'm going to take them first, the first to last submitted, and I'm going to assign a person to answer it. And if you don't know the answer to the question, then you can defer to your colleague, or you can just make it up, whatever you want. Who's going to know right at that point? So yeah, it's up to you.
It's stump the chump, right?
Yeah, right. So Roman, I'll start. And some of these might be even repeating what we said earlier, but that's fine, right? So Roman, can you discuss the security of logging into a cloud product such as Right Networks versus just a VPN?
Actually, I know there is an encryption that happens there. And again, that's more of a technical question that Eric would handle.
Okay.
So I'll pass it to you, Eric.
Yeah, Eric's like, thanks, Roman.
Yeah.
What do you say, Eric?
Well, generally, when you're logging into a cloud provider, you're still going to be doing that over a TLS or HTTPS connection, again, between your browser and the server. Now, if you're using something such as a virtual desktop where it's downloaded, again, they're building that encryption in to the stream as it passes through the network, or at least they should be.
Got it. Next question, Eric, can you mention or can you tell us what encryption at rest is and what it's needed for? I've never heard that term before.
Okay. Generally, when we think of encryption, we're thinking, again, that VPN, that HTTPS. So the traffic is moving over the wire.
Right.
Encryption at rest is when that file is sitting on your server, it is sitting on your laptop, it is encrypted. Most of us should have encrypted hard drives on all our machines right now. So if somebody was to steal my laptop, well, I'm going to be a little upset because of the cost of the laptop, but I'm not too worried about the data because it is all encrypted on there.
Got it. Okay. Eric, I'm gonna stick with you on this one, and then I'll go back to you, Roman, for the next one. But one person asks, Eric, they say if we're using a cloud-based network like Right Networks, since we're already using dual authentication for these networks on our laptops, the employees use at home, then are the VPNs for the home still necessary? In other words, do we still need a VPN connection even though we're also using authentication? I think the answer is yes.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, because if you have that man in the middle, or somebody is controlling a box that information flows over and it's not encrypted, they can read everything going over that box. And contrary to popular belief, when you connect to Right Networks or Google or something like that, your traffic is not travel in a straight line. It's going to pass through many different points. And if any one of those points has been compromised, that data can be read if it's not encrypted.
Got it. Okay, good. Roman, your turn. You did this earlier, so this should be a slam dunk. Somebody wanted just to repeat some of your recommendations for a good password manager or vault.
What I see in the surveys, I work with a group called CPA Firm Management Association, and we survey about 200 firms every year on the products they use. And the products we see coming up are LastPass, Keeper, Zoho, and I think it's RoboForm.
Okay.
And Eric, what other ones do you see out there, or which ones do you recommend?
1Password, especially if you have any Macs or a lot of iOS devices in the environment. But LastPass is probably the best and most common enterprise app that I run into now and recommend as well.
It's also easier for your family, like if you want to share with your spouse, your banking accounts and that information. It tends to be easier to set up than some of the others.
And a spreadsheet or your Outlook notes is not a password manager.
Yeah, I have one of those. You caught me. I'm definitely getting a password. My biggest issue with the password manager, guys, is and I admit this. I mean, my family and I share passwords. Like we share our Netflix password and our our my wife and I share like our banking passwords. You know what I mean? So if one of us if I get a password manager, that's all going to end. But
You
I
do
think
family password managers. It can be both individuals and shared on certain applications.
okay, that's good to know. Definitely got to look into it. It sounds like it's a really critical thing for all of our employees to have is to make
It
use
is a
of a
pain.
password manager.
Gene, it is a pain. I'll tell you, setting it up is hard for everyone, but
Yeah.
It's much better than having your accounts hacked or your identity stolen and dealing with that for months, if not years.
Yeah, and somebody asked a question about like, you would mention Zoho as a password manager, and I mean, is among the others that you mentioned, Roman? I mean, are they all? Is there any one that's better than the other, or are they all pretty? I gotta imagine at this stage they're pretty similar in features and functionality, right?
I believe it's like antivirus. They copy each other's features back and forth.
Yeah.
But we strongly recommend you stay with the ones that are enterprise business class rather than the freeware products that are out there. The reality is when it's freeware, they got to make money somewhere, and it's or they got to cut costs somewhere, which is on development oftentimes.
Okay, fair enough. Another person asked about the Roman, about the security firms you named for training, like KnowBe4, and there was some other And by the way, KnowBe4, for those of you guys listening, it's Know as in KNOW, and then Roman, I think it's
BE and then the number 4.
Right. Okay. What other security firms did you mention?
I saw FishMe and Wombat as being 2 other providers on the surveys.
Okay.
Eric, do you use anybody else at all, or?
Generally in government contractors, I'll see SANS has a program, but again, they were actually just hacked not too long ago through social engineering. So, but KnowBe4 is probably the most common.
Okay, fair enough. Eric, last question for you. This person asked about Google Authenticator. Are you familiar with it? Do you have any thoughts on it?
Yes, it's similar to Duo. It's basically just generates a random code for your second factor of authentication. It's widely used, kind of like everything else with Google, but and correct me if I'm wrong, Roman, but I think they've actually let that be used royalty free by quite a few other companies to bake it into their goods to allow that to be used as a 2-factor.
I don't know that, but I would believe it,
Okay. One final thing for you, Eric, then I'll ask Roman in just a couple minutes that we have left. So Eric, we've talked about all these different intrusions. Any advice as to how we can detect some warning sign that there might have been an intrusion? Anything we should be looking out for?
Again, you need to be monitoring your network, especially even in this remote workforce. Take a look at those VPN logs. Take a look at your application logs when people are logging in. If you know your environment and you see that Betsy logged in at 3 a.m., but Betsy never normally does that, maybe you want to ask. maybe you want to see what's going on. Other items are using, there's different types of software where you can monitor access to files. Are you seeing unusual access? Bob over here just downloaded a terabyte's worth of data. Why would Bob need to do that? So we want to investigate. But the biggest thing is monitoring, educating your people on, what to look for. And we don't want to scare them to the point where if they do accidentally click on a phishing email, that they don't tell us right away, because the longer it sits there, the longer and harder it is for us to clean it up.
Got it. Got it. Anything to add, Roman?
Well, when you talk about the most important things to think of that people are missing out there, one thing I forgot to mention was that as we push people home, we should have, particularly those that had never, admin people or tax people that never worked from home before,
Right.
we should make sure that their wireless connection is secure. And so what we do, we mandate someone formally walks them through the process to make sure that the firmware on that router is updated and the password is changed, because that's the first step there. And then making sure that people are aware not to use like older Windows 7 computers that might be compromised. With COVID causing so many families to work from home or work remotely, when something goes wrong or you need to have both kids on the computer at the same time, sometimes, all of us have an old Windows 7 PC that's on the shelf or stuck in a closet somewhere, and Windows 7 has been compromised. And so by plugging that into your network, you could be compromising the whole household as well as the firm.
Roman, I'm gonna have you last words. What resources? If I'm a CPA with a firm, small medium-sized firm. Where do you go to keep up to date on all this stuff?
Well, I attend a lot of security briefings from everyone from Dell to Gartner and different groups out there just to know what's out there. But honestly, I rely on people like Eric. There are people who are full-time security specialists, and there's some accounting firms that have people that do SOC 2 audits that keep up to date. But those are the people that are going to be most current. My phishing training comes from KnowBe4, so that keeps me current there. And so I think it's getting either you're using cloud providers that provide that, and I provide a security briefing within Right Networks, or if you run your own network, outsourcing it to a company that is doing not only the security infrastructure testing and the intrusion detection and prevention that Eric mentioned at an enterprise level, but also provides that security training for you.
Yeah, I think the big takeaway from a lot of this is that security, it's like, listen, I mean, as CPAs, our profession is extremely specialized. You have people that specialize in local and tax, people, wealth management, people, right? It's the same thing in the IT world, and particularly in the IT security world. And I think it is something that we have to build into budgets and recommend to our clients that they should have a relationship with a security professional or a security firm like Eric and Eric's firm to advise and to check in. And there's a little bit of an extra cost to doing that, but at the same time, it is we do what we do, and then we outsource to people that do what they do. And that way we're dealing with experts all the time. Roman Kepsick, Eric McMillan, you guys are awesome. Thank you very much for joining us. Everybody, if you can see, I've shared just the information. We don't have contact information here, but both these guys are on LinkedIn. Pretty easy to find their email addresses, or you can reach back out to me if you'd like to do that. If you'd like to be put into contact with either of them. So thank you, Eric, for joining us. I know you're out there somewhere, Eric. I know it. I can hear your voice, like I hear my wife's voice in the back of my head. I hear your voice, like in the back of my head. But Roman, I see you, and you look lovely, and enjoy Arizona and the weather.
Thank you.
And everyone, thank you for joining us as well. And guys, I look forward to doing this again sometime soon. Okay.
Thank you, Gene. Thank you.
All right, guys. Take care.
Gene.
Bye now.